Welcome back to Heart Treasure. This is episode 9 of our series, Building Biblical Friendships. And I'm so glad you're back because today we're talking about maintaining platonic friendships. And there is much to say on this topic. Platonic friendships, let's define that. People would say that a platonic friendship is a relationship between two people of the opposite sex in which there is a lot of mutual respect but no romantic component and probably no sexual engagement. So what we're talking about here is a relationship with two people where the romantic feelings have already been dealt with within the relationship. That is how we would define platonic relationships. A modern society will tell you that platonic friendships are possible because the old thinking about men and women not being able to be friends is what our modern society would call outdated gender dynamics, because yes, our world has changed. People have greater contact with each other, and it's not like in the old days where men and women would have to wait for a social engagement to meet someone of the opposite sex. Also, in our modern society, we know that you can have relationships across culture, you can have relationships across race, you can have relationships across nations even, okay? But why wouldn't a relationship across gender be possible? So in our modern society today, relationships with the opposite sex in the thinking is that they are possible. But romance is always lurking. And when one person develops feelings for the other person, it is no longer a platonic relationship. Because what happens is your goals become different in what you're pursuing in the relationship. Your intentions change. And each of you may have unexpected expectations or unspoken expectations that perhaps were not there when you started the relationship. The two of you might have agreed that you were just friends in the beginning of the relationship. But as soon as feelings change, there is no longer this mutual understanding of just friends, and you have what we call in the friend zone. So let's look at friendships in general. Just friendships between two women, two men, all of those relationships are forming social and emotional skills that will be good in a marriage. So what are these skills in marriage? Good, open communication, sharing important stuff about yourself, sharing your goals and your dreams, being sensitive to the need of another person and what they need at that time in their lives, being a good listener, making sure that you are holding yourself accountable to another person, giving 100% of yourself unconditionally, giving in the relationship and taking from the relationship, and nurturing in yourself kind of like a servant heart that takes care of the needs of another person. These are all good skills in marriage that we need to develop, and we develop them in the process of having friendships with people in general. So what happens in the natural course of relationships is that two people spend a lot of time talking to each other, and this inevitably means that they spend a lot of one-on-one time together. You also kind of develop a deep knowledge of what their dreams and desires are, what their hopes are, and you also get to know their personality really intimately. And also, very often in friendships, you share part of your daily routine, like driving to work together, you know? So what happens is, in friendships, a natural intimacy develops. And that natural intimacy is the kind of intimacy that almost forms the foundation to marriage. Because in a sense, friendship is a good foundation to marriage. So now as we are in a relationship, let's talk about this relationship developing between two members of the opposite sex. And what happens is that one party may develop the expectation of something more intimate developing out of their relationship, be it something more intimate romantically or even something more intimate sexually. At this point in the relationship, feelings need to be discussed. In the relationship between a man and a woman, where at this point where the feelings are discussed, there's actually just two decisions. Yes, we're going to move the relationship onto something more intimate, like a romantic relationship, or no, we're going to walk apart. Whatever happens, this situation has to be resolved in some way, otherwise the relationship will break down. And let's talk about how it can break down. Friendship, by its very nature, gives one message: I like you and I love spending time with you. And so what happens is you may verbally communicate that we're just friends, but by your actions of friendship, you're actually saying, I like you and I like to spend time with you. So that naturally gives a mixed message in friendship. And so this often means that people hang out, but they're not always sure about where they stand. So what happens if you develop feelings? You stay in the relationship because you hope that if somebody gets to know you, they'll also develop feelings for you. Or you let them know that if you get to know me and really get to know me, then you're going to fall in love with me. Or if I'm gentle and kind of like put my best foot forward and you really get to know me, you're going to ultimately fall in love with me. Things break down. All right, let's look at another scenario. Say I know that you got feelings for me, but we just agree that we're going to be friends. The problem with that situation is that one person naturally feels weaker or more vulnerable in that situation. And let's face it, hope springs eternal. They're always going to hope and have that hope inside of them that this relationship will develop to something different over time. It's not fair either. Another reason feelings need to be resolved is you might realize that you have feelings for the other person, but you decide to keep quiet and not say anything because essentially you're afraid of losing the friendship or losing the companionship. Now the problem with this situation is that you, the person that has developed these feelings, feels frustrated with how the relationship's going. You're dissatisfied because you're hoping for something more, and you're confused by your own emotions and their behavior and perhaps the things that they say. So whatever happens, there's this frustration inside of you because you're hoping for a natural progression to greater intimacy. Then of course there's the whole thing about how society sees platonic relationships. And quite frankly, if I want to move into a relationship with you and become emotionally intimate with you in a romantic relationship, I would always be questioning the emotional intimate relationship you have with another person of the opposite sex, because I would be questioning whether you are being emotionally intimate with me as well. So in general, it would make me a bit more reluctant to move into a relationship with you. Also, of course, some people engage in friendships because it means that you don't have to be committed in a relationship that's going towards marriage, but you get the benefits of friendship and emotional intimacy with someone else. So it actually allows you not to opt into the natural progression of friendship to marriage because your emotional needs are being satisfied in friendships alone. Now let's take a biblical perspective on the relationships between men and women. The Bible doesn't directly say men and women can't be friends, but what the Bible does do is give us really good principles about what is a wise and loving way to engage with in relationships. And so first off, the first point is that relationships and friendships are like the groundwork for marriage. And the skills that we develop there, as we've already spoken about, are actually meant to progress into an emotional intimacy that leads to marriage. Secondly, in 1 Corinthians 10 verse 23, it says that all things are lawful, but not all things are helpful. So if you think about it, in our modern society, there is no law that says men and women can't be friends and that friendship can't cross the gender. But it doesn't necessarily mean it's helpful. Because you see, for some person, it may be all right to have relationships with an opposite sex, but for another person, it might be the totally emotionally unhealthy thing to do. Then of course there's 1 Thessalonians chapter 4 verse 1 to 8, which talks to us about how we should deal with each other and how we should deal with each other in relationships. And one of the concepts that it explains in this passage is that it is not right to treat another person where you are going to do them wrong or where you're going to defraud them in some way. In other words, when it comes to relationships, you cannot engage in a relationship when your motives and intentions are actually something totally different. Defrauding another person, well, that's basically when your words don't match your actions. In that situation, you are defrauding that person by not being true to what you say, or your actions not being true to what you intending to make happen in that relationship. So when we are, as believers, engaging in a relationship with people of the opposite sex, we really have to watch our intentions and hope that we are not wronging each other in our relationships with each other. Then, of course, there's the whole principles about loving. Let's take it from 1 Corinthians 13. We are to love one another as brothers and sisters in Christ. In Romans 13 verse 10, it says that love does no harm to its neighbor. And how can we be in a relationship with someone of the opposite sex if we know that by having that relationship with them, we are harming them emotionally? There's also Romans 14 chapter 1, going all the way into Romans 15 verse 7, talking about how we should take care in our relationships with brothers and sisters that are weaker or not as strong as us. It causes us to have a sense of wisdom in terms of dealing with those relationships and how we go about them, because we are considering a weaker brother or sister and where they may be emotionally. So what it calls us to is a type of responsibility in our relationships with other people. Very often in a church situation, we think that having a friendship with somebody that is married is actually safe. But the problem there is that the natural progression of friendship is towards greater and greater emotional intimacy. And then what happens is what we call an emotional affair, where one person hasn't necessarily sexually engaged in an affair with someone else, but emotionally they have committed so much more to the person they're having a friendship with than the person that they are a covenant relationship with. So they're actually breaking that covenant relationship. So the point is, whether you're married or single, having a relationship with another person on a biblical basis exposes you to a temptation, whether it be a romantic temptation or ultimately a sexual temptation. The thing is, though, that in churches, relationships between married and single people naturally develop because we're all brothers and sisters in Christ. So the question you have to ask yourself is the structure of this relationship looking like something that is kindling for fire? Because if your attitude is going to be relaxed, there's going to be fire. I heard it said once that sin thrives in the laziness of ambiguity. In other words, if we don't talk openly and honestly about where we are in a relationship, what it allows to do is that unspoken words or the things that are not said lay the foundation for temptation and sin in the future. So to be safe, always be open and honest. Always do things in the open where there's no secrets or anything like that. Because when things aren't clear, we open ourselves to temptation. And it's never meant in a relationship or friendship to get to that point where we'll be tempted. So wise Christian interactions with people of the opposite sex is to make sure that you're always open and honest and not secretive or not upfront about where you are. Right now, taking all these biblical principles into consideration, say you now still decide to pursue a relationship with someone of the opposite sex. I think that there's a few things that you should take into consideration. Romance and the consequent emotional connection is going to happen anyway. If not now, it's going to happen later. And you need to make sure that you take this into consideration. So women, consider that men sometimes enjoy the emotional connection they can have in a relationship, but they're not necessarily going to commit to marriage. So be careful. Men, women like the companionship and the emotional intimacy that a relationship gives them, but it doesn't necessarily mean marriage. So whatever happens, you have to negotiate this one really carefully, because ultimately there is that fear of rejection and anger that comes in a relationship, that where the other person is not prepared to take on the responsibility of the relationship. So that's the first thing to consider. So as you're developing this romantic relationship with a person, you have to make sure that you honor that person and make very clear and realistic understanding of where your relationship is and where it's progressing. Sometimes it's better to get to know someone within a group, because in a group you cannot necessarily give the wrong signals, but also within a group you can get to know someone without necessarily making that commitment yet. So in a group, it's much safer. But if you find that in a group, you're finding that you want to spend more one-on-one time with that specific person, you need to make your intentions clear, that you intend to go for romance, not just friendship, and that you are keen on seeing where the relationship develops. So now, as you're considering this relationship that you're developing, you also need to honestly examine your emotions and feelings, as well as give due consideration and discernment for their emotions and feelings. And you have to be wise and communicate about where you are, because there's a risk involved. You have to honestly ask yourself, are you emotionally ready for this type of relationship? Are you going to be able to cope with emotional feelings that come out of this relationship? And are they ready for this type of relationship? Or is it perhaps better that you allow a greater time of growth on both your parts before you pursue the relationship into the next step? You have to honestly examine yourself and consider the other person as well, not just yourself, in terms of whether this relationship is ready to progress at all. So you've tried the romantic relationship, and after a period of time, you guys have decided just to be friends. Again, there is a consideration that you have to take in what let's just be friends actually means. Is it, I'm going to coast in this relationship until I find someone better? Or is it, you're just a good stand-in for a friend that I can go out with at night? Or is it, I want to be in an emotionally intimate relationship with you, but I don't want to make commitment or take responsibility for the relationship on the other end? These are all considerations that you have to take into consideration when you say, let's just be friends. And then there has to be some adjustment that takes place. You know, friends don't take the time and your schedule for granted. They don't say, look, you must just drop everything and come and see me. Friends take things into consideration. But if you in your relationship of just being friends is still going to require them to drop everything and be there with you, then you are still requiring that they give you the priority of an intimate romantic relationship. And this is particularly relevant to women. We tend to still give that guy that priority in our time and in our schedule that we used to give them when we used to be more than friends. Now, especially to the ladies, you need to remember that you are a valuable person and you need to be treated with respect and honor. So anybody engaging in a relationship with you needs to give you that appropriate respect and honor when it comes to being honest about what their intentions and what their commitments are. And then, ladies, if you do decide to continue in the relationship, in the romantic progression of the friendship into marriage, please do not already start imagining the color of your wedding and the names of your children. Take it slow. Dating is about getting to know someone, and it is an opportunity to do research on a potential partner, not progress straight to marriage. So don't in your mind already commit to getting married to him when you're still busy getting to know him. And that's really relevant in all romantic relationships. View dating or relationships with the opposite sex as a way to do research as to what you are looking for in a partner, and take the commitment slowly, step by step, as you get to know the person. Don't commit all the way to marriage when you're still in the early part of your relationships. Well, that's all that we're going to be discussing today. I hope that you have benefited from a greater understanding on what it means to have a platonic relationship. Be sure to check out all our previous videos on building biblical friendships, and be sure to subscribe and like this video to let me know that you are benefiting from this series. The next one is all about how to build friendships. Hope to see you then. Until then, bye.